So after signing the political chapters of the association agreement and the EU summit on 21st of March 2014, both parties signed the remaining sections of the association agreement on the 27th of June 2014. The DCFTA part has provisionally entered into force on the 1st January 2016, so very recently. It is important to underline that in order to enable association agreement and DCFTA to enter fully into force, it has to be ratified by all of the 28 EU member states, and we are now facing an issue of the Netherlands, where citizens during the consultative referendum of the 6th of April have voted against the ratification of the association agreement and the DCFTA. So a viable solution to this rather unfortunate turn of events is still to be found. I understand that some of you attended the last Friday talk by my colleague Ambassador Rob Zagman, so he could elaborate a bit more what's the current state of play and how much the Dutch government has been involved in resolving this process. But as we can presume, the major fact is the British referendum, whether to be or not to be within the EU, and it could influence the further steps taken by the Dutch government. We can say a few words about this issue a bit later. Now I would like to focus on the second pillar. So I mentioned association agreement with its component, let's say economic component, DCFTA. The second pillar I would like to mention is the Visa Liberalization Action Plan. And in general, this initiative is designed to allow citizens of particular Eastern membership countries, Georgia, Moldova and Ukraine, to stay up to 90 days within Schengen area without the need to obtain a visa. As we know, the New Zealanders have, let's say, enjoy this visa waiver scheme. The Ukrainians, they do not, although they are our close, let's say, neighbors. So I'm more than confident that I don't have to explain to distinguished scholars, students, how important people-to-people contacts are. And in Poland, we are really looking forward to it. And the Polish government made a lot of efforts in the past to enable Ukrainians to come to the EU without this need to have, let's say, Schengen visa. Obviously, there are particular requirements that have to be met by those countries, Georgia, Moldova and Ukraine, in order to be included in the scheme, visa waiver scheme or visa liberalization action plan. These requirements concern human rights, personal documents and anti-corruption institutions. In December 2015, the European Commission has stated that Ukraine had met all the requirements. So now we are waiting for some, let's say, bureaucratic and legislative procedure on the EU side to be completed. The third pillar is EU assistance to Ukraine, both financial and technical. Furthermore, I would like to distribute some documents just in order also to get the audience familiar with a very good work of the two Polish think tanks, Polish Institute of International Affairs and Center for Eastern Studies. And they do a very good job because they are very good specialists in Ukrainian issues. So some of you, if you are really interested in these topics, you can always visit their websites and you can read their reports in English as well, and they are very, let's say, detailed and very accurate analysis. So one of those analyses, just as a sample, I would like to share with you, is mainly focused on this financial EU assistance. But anyway, I would like to say a few words about this. So, I mean, financial and technical assistance, EU assistance to Ukraine. The European Union is determined to ensure that Ukraine has all the support it needs in the short and long term to undertake the political and economic reforms that are necessary to consolidate a democratic, united and prosperous Ukraine. Just to give you some numbers. In the years 2014-16, the EU and its member states have earmarked over 250 million euros, which is roughly more than 400 million New Zealand dollars, in the form of traditional development assistance. Also, since 2014, the European Union has allocated over 2.2 billion euros, which is 3.5 billion New Zealand dollars, in macro-financial assistance. We distinct these two forms of assistance due to the specificities, and I mean traditional development aid is usually non-refundable, while macro financial assistance requires the form of loans to the beneficiary government. And before I conclude, I want to underline that one more issue. Since 2014, Ukraine has lost control over its two regions. Crimean Peninsula has been illegally annexed by Russia, and Lugansk and Donetsk are being occupied by Russia-backed so-called separatists. There's no secret with some rich criminal background. This is a topic for another speech, since the matter at hand is both legally and politically complicated. And let me just say that Poland, the European Union, and other member states consider illegal annexation of Crimean Peninsula as a severe breach of international law and serious infringement towards post-Cold War order in Europe. We also do not and never will recognize the so-called authorities of Donetsk and Lugansk people republics. In this context, I would like to quote the declaration by the High Representative, so let's say the chief of the European diplomacy, Mrs. Federica Mogherini, which was issued, released 2 months ago, almost 2 months ago, on the second anniversary of the annexation of Crimea. 2 years on from the illegal annexation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol and by the Russian Federation, the European Union remains firmly committed to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The European Union reiterates that it does not recognize and continues to condemn this violation of international law. It remains a direct challenge to international security, with grave implications for the international legal order that protects the unity and sovereignty of all states. The European Union remains committed to fully implementing its non-recognition policy, including through restrictive measures. The EU calls again on United Nations member states to consider similar non-recognition measures in line with the UN General Assembly Resolution 262. You might remember a resolution which was called as integrity of the territory of Ukraine. The EU reaffirms its deep concern at the military build-up and the deterioration of the human rights situation in the Crimean Peninsula, including the denial of freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of religion and belief, and the persecution of persons belonging to minorities, in particular the Crimean Tatars. We had another development 1 month later, the ban imposed by the Supreme Court, so-called Supreme Court in Crimea and Supreme Court in Russia of the Mejlis, so the self-governance of Crimean Tatars. The EU calls for full compliance with international human rights standards and other obligations under international law, all pending cases of human rights violations such as enforced disappearance, torture and killings should be thoroughly investigated. So that was the declaration by Mrs. Federica Mogherini. So in this context, I would like to reiterate once again that we must commend Ukraine for its commitment to the process of reforms. However, as I stated in the beginning, the process of helping Ukraine to fulfill its European ambitions is still far from being over. And thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to take some questions.